The solid fact way to do this is actually go out and set up one of those evaporation pans. If we want to know what our true evaporation is, okay, we'll go set up a pan. We talked about this the other day. We got a pan set up and we know exactly how much surface water evaporates every day. We refill it, measure it every day. Refill it, measure it, refill it, measure it. And so we get a nice record. And here in this valley, I bet you we got 50 years or at least of records on evaporation pan. Well, that's pretty good history. We can do a pretty good job of modeling off of that. We also know what the multiplier is for a given crop off of that pan reading. And we know that turf is just about a 0.7 multiplier right across the board. And we get that information from our irrigation guide for our region. Let me grab that again. Now from this irrigation guide I can dig out Walla Walla and we can find out what the multipliers are for the different crops, different times of the year. And so I have, it will tell me in my irrigation guide what the pan factor is for a given crop in a given month. So we'll just take July, since it's our hottest month here in this valley, and take a look at some crops. Alfalfa, the pan factor multiplier for alfalfa is 0.76, but it's 0.76 for the entire year. It has a very common demand for growth. Now that isn't really true, because when we cut it, then all of a sudden our transpiration drops down to nothing if we're doing this alfalfa for hay. And if we cut 4 cuttings of hay, there's 4 times in the year that we cut that right down to the nubs, and there's virtually no transpiration for a day or two before it starts leafing up again. And so we kind of have a little blips like this in its actual use. But if we just let it go as a pasture, that's the way it would behave. Pasture and turf, 0.80. I thought it was 0.7, it's 0.8. So we could have the pan reading, we could listen to the weather station every day, and they would say, okay, today at Whitman Mission, the pan evaporation was 0.40 inches. How much water did I use in my turf? My pan was 0.40, and I have a 0.8 multiplier for turf. I simply take the value, 0.40 inches, that was the pan evaporation, times 0.80, which is my crop multiplier. And I got my crop multiplier from the Washington Irrigation Guide for this valley, and that would then give me, if I can multiply, and that was for turf. For that given day, I really used 32/100ths of an inch. Now all I do is go in and adjust my sprinkler system to reapply 32/100ths of an inch of water. If I got my nice Osmat Toro system or my Maxicom Rainbird system, all I do is it just adjusts the percentages and does it for me that next night. And if the next day it ended up being 0.36 inches of CU, it'll bump it up a little bit for the next day. If the next day dropped to 0.28 inches, it'll drop it down a little bit to adapt for it. Just percentages up and down off of what they consider the average. We could set this thing up to be at 100%, we'd say it's going to run at 0.30 inches, so we'd go up to 108% to run 0.32 inches. So it would just adjust itself up. And every sprinkler then would adjust up 8% for that night. So it's real, I mean, it gets to be a real straightforward, very clean process. And we can just do a great job where we have that kind of flexibility for daily watering to just really baby that crop. And we do have that ability in orchards. Many of these solid set orchards have that capability. A lot of turf around the area has that capability. And some other specialty crops where you can afford to put in a super sophisticated system. A few other examples of crops and what their multiplier is. Apples, standard crop obviously here in this valley. Apples with cover. The multiplier back in April is 0.36. See, no transpiration, no leaves yet, just starting to leaf out. So 0.36 times the evaporation pen, because the soil isn't saturated on the surface, so we're just getting evaporation in April. Moves up in May to 0.68. Okay, now we're getting some leaf surface, and it's starting to warm up, and so it's starting to get a little more transpiration going. By June, it's 0.92. And then July and August, it's 1.0. The same amount of transpiration and evaporation is coming off that orchard that comes off of your swimming pool. Now that's a lot of water coming out of an orchard, but then there's many days that we'll get a ½ inch of water loss in this valley. You get a 105-degree day with less than 10% humidity, we'll have a ½ inch of water leave off that evaporation pan. And that's how much that orchard's using. Why? Because of that huge leaf surface. See, we have the crop with the biggest leaf surface is orchard. And so it has the greatest transpiration rates. And so it gets right up there to the big numbers. Let's look at another big crop or two in here. Cherries is 100 or a 1.0. Let's go to potatoes, because potatoes is always a major water user. There we go. The multiplier for potatoes only gets up to 0.92. Everybody thinks potatoes uses more water than any other crop in this state because they just see it being applied so heavily. Well, it's not true. Orchard is. Now, potatoes have a tremendous amount of leaf surface too. That's a lot of vine out there in that field. Plus, they're sucking a lot of water through them. They're water hogs. For the size of plant they are, they absorb tons and tons of water because they're trying to blow up that tuber. Another one is sweet corn, or field corn. And the multiplier in field corn, the highest is 0.92 in field corn. So it's not as big of a, even though that's a lot of water going out of a field, it's still not as bad as orchard. Yes?
No grapes on that.
Grapes? Now, what do you think grapes? I heard high over here. How many think grapes are high consumptive users? How many think they're low consumptive users? Why? Because other people said high. Think about the grape plant. Well, you look at a grape plant. Look at its leaf. Is it a slick leaf? The surface of a grape leaf is shiny. Grape is a desert plant. A grape is a water-conserving plant. It does not use a lot of water. And let me see what grapes are. I'm assuming it's going to be pretty low. Grapes, 0.72 is the highest multiplier on grapes, and that's in the hottest part of the season. And that would be on wine grape, or on table grapes. Wine grapes, you'd shut that baby down and stress it at that point. Hops, well, they don't grow them here, so they may not show up. Oh, they do, though. Hops, 1.20, which you might expect. You got a 20-foot vine, and you know vines are just water hogs. And so in August, this thing goes into major glut for water.